everyone. And we are recording. So I'm Desiree Patno. I am the CEO and founder of Editor B and Desiree Patno Enterprises. And I'm based here in Irvine, California. And we have today on our guests of Know the Rules of Game through the, what is we calling it today? We are calling it through the consumer behavior through the economic lens, if I could get my tongue tied right here, right? We have two incredible women that really love each other that go on Clubhouse, and we have met there. And as I said, diamond in the rough. She is unbelievable. I have such a pleasure of talking to her, and I get to flip the switch and I get to ask her questions, but I know. So we have her on our bio, and I don't want to take up too much time to go over it. She is a CEO of DISTILL, and she spent 20 years on Wall Street, and she is the facts of facts. And I love her analogies. And like I said, everywhere you see in the post, it is what it is. So thank you very much for joining us. And tell everyone, I want a fun fact about Neely. I want to know something that's driving about Neely that makes her so uniquely different that not even her husband and her partner knows about.
That is a tall order out of the gate. Okay. My whole family thinks I hate coconut.
Okay. Because
I grew up hating coconut. Secretly, I actually like it now. And it's like, I could totally reveal that to my family and let them know. But like at this point, you know, you get after a certain age, you're like, do you go back? Is this revisionist history now? Like at what point did you start liking coconut? I don't know. But you know, what's interesting about that, Desiree, is I am known for being able to hold a view on something. And then when facts change, you know? So it's like, I didn't like coconut cake and coconut cream pie for a while because I didn't like coconut. I changed my relationship with coconut. Guess what? I like those things now. So probably too much.
Could that be because I found a secret about you that you love to go shopping, you love to touch and feel, that maybe you get to go to the store and buy that coconut cupcake while it's sitting there?
It's just cute. It's like the cutest cupcake in the case. And so I was like, do I really not like coconut? Or is that like a childhood thing that I've evolved on? You know, so I think it's a lot like life, you know, kind of revising and revisiting some of our past biases and what have you, and our perspectives and trying on something new. And as it turns out, I like coconut cake and coconut cream pie now.
Okay, so that's a perfect family, right? That's a perfect lead-in though to the conversation about, can we be open of the change? Can we maximize the effects of the pandemic? Can we really dig into how it was and now is and could be of what you're doing in consumer behavior? If you think about consumer behavior through an economic lens, the dichotomy of change, the opportunity, we were talking before we went live about what's the difference between Wall Street and now, and how could you even think of going back to Wall Street and what you know now, not only in the years past Wall Street, but you spent 20 years there. So talk to everyone about a little framework or why this is so important that we listen and learn from this entire podcast.
Yeah, for sure. So just a little bit of a background. I was on Wall Street for 20 years. I did that largely commuting from the Midwest. I'd probably be on the road anywhere from 25 to 35, 45 weeks out of the year, depending on what was going on. That is not a great fun life. Because I actually calculated it. I run my life down to the 6-minute increment. And because I'm a data nerd, okay, I calculated it. And I at one point at the peak of my travel and my professional career on Wall Street, I looked at it and said, I'm literally spending 10 hours a week just in the act of travel. What else could I do differently with those 10 hours if I were able to reinvest it in myself, in my health, in my family, in my practice? And unfortunately, it's an industry that doesn't really allow for, you know, comments and questions. And so, you know, you come to this point, as I did, I came to a point where I looked ahead and said, first 20 years we're on Wall Street. Is that really what I'm signing up for the next 20 years? Is this really the lifestyle that I want? Is there another way? And gratefully, I have a business partner, Kayla Wesser, who's the co-founder of DISTILL. We had worked together for 6 years at our former firm. And we looked at each other at one point, and this is funny because it's going to talk about cupcakes. We had this conversation between the two of us, and we said, we kind of like working with each other, maybe more than we actually like doing this job. What if we did something together? And what would that look like? And we actually whiteboarded it. We said, okay, we could probably go and make cupcakes for a living and have a ton of fun doing a bakery business, or we could consult on the consumer economy. Like, which one do you want to do? So we're like, well, let's try the consulting on the consumer economy first. I feel like that's where the need is. You know, people might need those insights actually right now more than they need cupcakes. So, but
saturated market.
Yes, but so we pivoted from Wall Street in the early 2017. So we're coming up on kind of a milestone early next year, which is great. And we have worked together beautifully, actually. The partnership has really worked out quite nicely. A testimony to friendship and to awesome. Working well with one another and respecting each other. And, you know, here we are. We advise CEOs and boards on matters of the consumer economy, all through an economic lens. We're kind of, we define ourselves as being at the SEAL Team 6 phone call, you know, when you really need to get that insight that's board approved, but yet CEO friendly. Those are the phone calls that we get when people are actually feeling maybe even a little most vulnerable around what's going on in their business. And we thoroughly enjoy coming alongside some of the best decision makers in the world and making sure that they have the fullest set of information as they make their decisions. So that's the journey from Wall Street to DISTILL, and man, do we love it. We love it so much. So it's a ton of fun.
Well, here you have two incredibly talented women in a time where D&I has been, let me throw the money, but not show up and listen and be part of it. And here you are, you know, we were part, NW and I were part of in 2018, getting the women on board signed as an act here at SB 826 here in California, which is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And it got a lot of pros and cons if you think about what's going on. And the fact that you just honed it in on the fact that bringing the board and the C-suite friendly, that you have a safe space, you have an opportunity to not have judgment, but you're there to give the data to them to make that decision. It's like, you can pay me to be the president or running certain things right now just because of so much going on. And that decision you make is so important to so many lives around the world with, you know, did you sign up for this, right? As you talk about going back, is this really what I have? And you break it down. And I believe if everyone would do what you do, which is why you're so great, because people don't, is break it down to their time management, break it down to why they're doing what they're doing and how they're playing the sandbox. And that's what leads us into consumer behavior, because we are all different in how we analyze, how we buy, how we pivot, how we change. Like you became, don't like coconut, but hey, hubby, like coconut. You might think about that next time. And it's like my son buying a cheesecake for my husband. You always love this. So he keeps buying it, think he's doing something special for him. No, I hate that. You know, you're like, what is it? What's gonna, you lose that thought. So that being said, it could not be more powerful at a time where consumer behavior, in my opinion, is changing so much. And they're lost in their thoughts, yet you're able to capture that and break it down for the executives and also to help the consumers. Because when I first met you, it was really, and I was listening to your analogies and how you're thinking and how you were presenting the data, but also how from a consumer point, not from the executive C-suite, because I run a council for boardrooms for women. I'm the chairwoman of, you know, CEO of major companies that in real estate and the MBA and everything else, to talk about how we can help each other at those pivotal moments, right? Like you're talking about. But I came in there as a consumer and said, wow, she has really enlightened me on the perspective of how we're here, how we're changing, what to think about through different ways of looking at a different economic lens, right? So talk to me about that and where and why that looks like before we go on the rules 1, 2, and 3, because people need to hear, I think, that the why consumer behavior is so important to the economic lens.
Yeah, for sure. So first and foremost, we don't presuppose that anyone knows what we know when we walk into a room. I think that is the first way that we choose a culture of cherishing everyone in the room, is without condescending, we just start with the basics. So, here for your podcast, I'll just start with the basics. The US economy is a very important global economy, first and foremost. Point number 1, it's a big deal. How economies kind of measure themselves against each other, right? And how like global health of, the well-being of people, right? There's a ton of debate about this, but like very simply stated, it's measured by GDP. And that's gross domestic product. And gross domestic product is the cost of everything consumed and produced within the borders of a nation. That's the simplest way to explain it. For the United States, 2/3 of our GDP is consumer spending. Okay. Wow. So that's goods and services. So it's the gas you buy, it's the healthcare visit you go to, it's everything. It's the home you buy. All of that is, your home related expenses, that all of that is embedded in that personal consumption expenditures. You'll hear people say the word PCE or consumer spending. It's all basically the same thing. And that's 2/3 of our economy. Within that, we can look at another measurement called retail sales. And retail sales is something that gets thrown around every single month. It's put out by the Census Bureau. And it's a collection of what's going on in sales trends by businesses. And by and large, outside of like restaurants, which is a debatable, like, is that a product? Is that a service? It gets a little bit of a debate on that, but outside of restaurants, it's pretty much the goods component of that consumer spending. And that's about half. It's about 45% of that consumer spending overall. So it's important to, like, I think as citizens of the world and citizens of business and decision, like, we hear these numbers thrown out here. Right. And the first thing we love to do is start with, like, what's the context? Why does it even matter? So retail sales is half of, personal consumption expenditures, and personal consumption expenditures is 2/3 of the US economy. And the US economy matters because that's like the global economy, right? I mean, that's part of it. So we do like to start with a posture of just explaining all of that. Now, within that, so that kind of like 2/3 spending, right?
Yeah.
We like to ask like 2 really simple questions. And we're simple girls, okay? Like that's the ultimate thing. Like, if you can't explain this to like a 12-year-old, there is no point in doing business, in my opinion. Okay. So we're simple girls. So we ask ourselves these 2 questions. Does the consumer have cash? And do they want to spend it on what and why? So their capacity to spend, their proclivity to spend, right? So do they have it? Do they want to spend it? From there, things get a little more complex.
I was going to say, okay, that's pretty simple. Do you have money on your pocket? Okay, you can go buy it. You don't have money in your pocket, you can't buy it.
Right. And here's going full circle back to where, where I think some of our passion is in talking about what's ahead is it was kind of easy the last 18, 20 months to call the consumer. It's not always popular in the world I live in as an advisor to tell your clients, my job was easy the last 18 months. But it was. You infuse $1.5 trillion of direct stimulus payments and federal pandemic unemployment compensation. Guess what? The consumer spends. Okay. And that is not hard to figure out based on whose door was open to receive that spending, right? I mean, it was not a difficult thing to do. It was difficult to navigate it as decision makers, right? If you're running a retailer and you have to lay off 85% of your workforce. So our heart was very much with them as they were going through like emotionally draining conversations. But the pattern and the path of consumer spending, not that difficult. It's starting to get really difficult. because it's around nuances. So, I think that's where our phones have been a little busier lately.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. A professor, we didn't hit the fact off that she just started school as a professor. She's running the program. She gets to do it her way. And if you haven't realized, she works 20 hours a day. That's beside the point. But the thing is, no, the complexity of the ideas is that how many fast food joints are shutting down, walking out, closing their doors, how many entire facilities of small businesses can't hire the employees. I mean, we can go down, and the complexity you talk about, the $1.5 trillion, we're now in a spot that you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't, give or not. And the fallout's going to be huge either way you look at it. And that's going to be huge.
I started to try to just visually map this the other day on the whiteboard. And that is one of the titles I get to hold when we were sitting down with our legal officers, our lawyers. They're not legal officers, they're lawyers. And we paid big girl lawyers, okay, for setting up our business. So if our lawyers are watching, hi, we love you. Okay, they did a very good job. So in our shareholder, documents and everything, they're like, okay, what's your title? And I was like, I don't want to do anything conventional. We get to do it. So we did have to do our conventional CEO, co-founder, CFO, co-founder, but they did actually allow us to write in chief whiteboard officer for me. And then Kayla is chief timekeeper. Okay. So, cause time is money and she's the money gal in our business. So, yes. So that's true story. There you go. I don't know if other people know that. It's actually in our legal documents that I'm the chief whiteboard officer.
So
chief whiteboard artist. Actually, chief whiteboard artist. That's the official title.
So CWBA. So we should do a post on that. Officially, Neely is the CWBA, and has that ever been posted before? That's a new chief C-suite officer.
No. Totally.
You're first.
I would love to take credit for it, but I've always had this inspiration from Maxine Clark, who's the founder of Build-A-Bear Workshop, and she's a dear friend. And when they launched their business, they were like, we're the chief strategy bear. I'm the chief chair bear. I'm the chief, HR bear. And so I love that they did that. And I mean, it's literally their titles. And so, and I think, look, Desiree, this is one of the things I love about spending time with you. Life is pretty serious. Okay. And there's some serious things going on in this world. And so I'm not making light of that, but if there isn't humor and joy and levity kind of in that process, I think it's so important, because I think we all learn better, right? And we're all more willing to receive information if we come with a little bit of humor at it. So
we have to, and that's exactly right. I mean, we cannot get in a room without laughing our hearts out, and people are just like, too gigglies. Come on, can we get with the program? But see, that leads us to the name of the title of this podcast, Know the Rules of the Game. Mm-hmm. I trademark because life is a game. Mm-hmm. As harsh and as crude and as core as that is, you're making a living off of consumer behavior analyses. You had to learn that, though, from the Wall Street to get the books of experience to understand the realism and how we curate the data can be so interpreted different ways, and understanding the full data analyses of the books, right? That's available to you, and the curation of change. And so the idea is that our health, our ability to mentally, emotionally EQ of all that stuff going through is so pivotal. I think it's more important than the talent itself, is that we can connect and love and live and be there for in that moment. And that's where the consumer behavior for me comes into, is how is that changing, or how are we losing people in a space if we can bring them together? And that's why I love what you're doing as a professor. You're able to intently get into them to be a small part of their life. But I believe, I'm sorry, Neely, you're not a small, you're a pivotal changer to trajectory put them into. If they only knew the rules of the game to play the game, you are teaching them the rules of the game in your class of understanding and appreciating that philosophy of where you say, so they can grow into their own DNA.
The very first lesson, I teach leadership and ethics, and tomorrow will be the first class of the semester. And I love teaching. I love being a professor. It's always been a personal, professional development thing I wanted to pursue. Last year, I decided to pursue it on an adjunct basis. Found an amazing university that just dovetails just so nicely with my own personal beliefs, as well as a culture of cherishing, which I really appreciate. And the dean of our college is amazing. I have some of the best coworkers. Like, it fills my bucket. It literally makes me a better person every day by teaching. The first lesson that I teach, so just in case I don't think any of them have been wise enough to dial into this podcast. So hopefully, because I like to make it a little bit of a surprise, a shock and awe. But tomorrow morning, the first exercise we do is a values exercise. And at the end of it, after they identify kind of their unique 5, most important values, I explained to them, okay, now that you know what your values are, you're now in charge of making sure you're not triggered.
Oh,
so it's your job to keep poise in the room. It's not other people's job to keep your poise. It's your job. That's the first day 1, we take ownership of our poise. And that is the first rule of the game that I would recommend from me for your podcast is maintain poise. In order to do that, you need to invest in understanding what your triggers are. You're really wise to understand what your team's triggers are so that you don't inadvertently trigger them, right, as well.
wow.
And when you do feel triggered, right, by something, to just pause with that poise, right, and name it. Like, why am I so unsettled right now? Like, why do I want to go for someone's jugular? Like, pause in that moment and name it. Like, oh, it's because I value truth over safety, or, oh, I value safety over truth. Like, naming that can be so important when we understand what triggers us. So maintaining poise, because you will never have power in a room if you can't maintain poise, and poise among others. So that's the first lesson. So if anyone's watching, who's going to be in my class tomorrow, you got the jump on it. Be quiet.
Well, drop the mic. That is, or as you'd say, close the front door. That is that you have read my mind without even preempting this. That is where I feel that this world is going. We're trigger happy, and you have just set the stage for the first rule to say, what is your trigger points? What is you can help to make sure, because once you identify what it is, say it, pause, analyze it, and how can you make it not your trigger point, or at least lessen it to where it's manageable, that you don't react to it and cause something you can't take back.
Yep. That, and I'd like to tell you, I've done that perfectly from day 1. No, in fact, Desiree, Mama has some scar tissue on that. I've done that extraordinarily poorly with my bosses before, with my direct reports before. It matters so much to me personally, because I've actually failed so spectacularly at it, that I know now with that scar tissue. And if there's anything a professor can do, is that I'm not trying to protect students, but rather let my scar tissue be your lesson and your guide as you head into your phase of growth and professional journey. You're going to make mistakes, but in case someone hasn't told you what this feels like, let me tell you what it feels like to fail miserably, okay, in a conversation with an employee. I've done that before, a handful of times. So,
well, but see, you're opening your heart to the vulnerability of letting them see your pain and your scars, so they can see this is real and not you just saying it, like reading it. And this is where it gets my goat every time talking to a professor or talking to someone, where they go through the analytics, they go, and there's no flavor, there's no emotion, there's no passion, there's no heart. And one of the ways I get people to open up about their heart and getting to the core, like, Desiree, how do you get to become BFF as all these people? Because the fact is that you act as if you've known him for 20, 30 years, is because I expose my vulnerability, my flaws, my and so many different layers. And then my inner pain and struggles of how I can't pronounce names, I can't do this and this, but what I am good, I'm phenomenal at. But we all need to And so it's kind of like that facade that I always say, that we're dating right now. People are like, what? I said, I have nothing on that is going to make you think that I'm someone who I'm not. And that reality has to be, is you go on a date, let me get all maked up, let me get all gussied up, let me go out. And then when I'm done with my date, I'm going to take everything on and be real.
Mhm.
No, every person you meet is, in my opinion, you are dating, whether romantically or not. The point is you're dating because you're in that moment, sharing that space with that person at that time. And so to your point, you are putting yourself out there of your heart and soul. This is what my scar looks like. This is my life looks like. And this is how we can pivot to where you can grow from mine as a mother, as a teacher, as someone who's lived my experiences. I'm setting the bar so you can jump here and then go. Oh my gosh. Love it.
And, you know, it's a tiny little, maybe even cheesy way of thinking about it, but I think it also has helped me personally understanding what is still a wound and not yet healed. And then actually understanding that scar tissue actually means you healed from it. There's still a mark there, but that mark is a mark of bravery, of courage. You know, in fact, with my nieces, we call bruises courage spots. I actually wrote a whole LinkedIn article about it. I think it's incredibly important that we acknowledge what bruises and scars are. They are signs that you got back up. And so, while, however feminine too, as this conversation might sound, I will tell you 100%, you know, young men need to hear these messages too. And I've had tears, you know, in my office from young men as they've kind of had to rethink like who they are and their poise and their triggers as they're learning who they are. And this is not a gender specific conversation. It's definitely one that seems to resonate kind of across the board. So that's why I like to teach it. And
you're just, okay. So we got to change one fact right now. This is not cheesy to you. This cannot be determined as cheesy. This has to be that this is a way, as they always used to say, it's not just about helping them, it's helping yourself. So this is not about being cheesy. This is about your giving. And it's also, people don't realize, is actually it's helping yourself, who's actually being the teacher to go with it. So
totally. I tell them all that all the time. I'm like, don't underestimate like the life that you're actually giving to me in this moment. Like you think you're going along, you're kind of passively receiving all this information. You're actually engaging in my future, in my outcome, in my joy too. Like this is community. And again, I think just adding a little bit of respect, you know, and having them understand their role and their education isn't just about them, that it's actually about their colleagues and about their floors that they live on and their professors. That does prepare them to make them better workers for everybody, you know, down the road, because that's what life is.
So the interaction that I have found in today's world between two people having a conversation, the people that are hearing that conversation has affected, and the back channel, like in Clubhouse, or things that are going on that see, they who have fear or have lack self-confidence to get up to the stage to talk, you have instilled upon them to come up and have the strength to say, you know, thank you for that, because the same thing happened to me, or I can relate to that, or I can pull that value out, for having that conversation. Even though the conversation isn't about them and or with them, they're able to pull from it. And that makes all the world better, because this is where consumer behavior is, that we have to say, why did they pick that item? What they're going to go with it. You know, we had that one debate that one day about, no, I want to go physically and touch it. I love those 3,000 items in that grocery store. What are you talking about? I want to see it. I want to be there. Versus then having everything pre-programmed to me and sent to me. That value is so incredible. And so number two, what are we looking at? I mean, I'm already jazzed about one. We could talk about that for 5 hours. So what's rule number two?
Rule number two, and this definitely relates to people and it relates to data and the economy. So I'll bring us back to the economy a little bit on this too, is it's really important to hold wonder, okay, for what could come or for what could be. And I think, maybe it's I don't have the perfect answer as to like why we are wired right now the way that we are, that like things have to be, A or B, or, masked or unmasked, or vaxxed or unvaxxed, and I understand there's nuances behind all these conversations, but I feel like Republican or Democrat, like we're all kind of like put into these like two oppositional side points. And I think where we're going to be best served, and it's going to take some time to do this, and it'll definitely lead up to point number 3 on rules of the game, but we need to hold wonder for what could be, both in ourselves and in others. We get called often because there's usually a crisis in someone's numbers. Okay, like, hey, things aren't what we thought they were going to be. So what's going on? Because I'm reading all of these headlines and we don't seem to fit in those headlines. So is there something else going on? We think maybe there is, we some version of that call or email comes in. Literally just got an email today of that's kind of implying some of that right now. So very common way for people to come to us. And we very quickly kind of work with them and listen, about what's going on in their business. And we study actively what's going on in the consumer landscape 2 to 3 hours a day. This is why I can never go back to Wall Street, because we spend so much time now actually analyzing the consumer economy and the consumer behavior and consumer spending. We would never be able to do a Wall Street job with how we want to research it. They'll never work with each other. So we've chosen to say no to the security of a Wall Street paycheck so that we can have the security of our process. And that will ultimately matter. Invest in your business and your product, and it will follow. We spend
the passion and love that you're bringing to the table and how you're getting the data. You're not driven by anyone to get the data other than your truth of how you got that data, and you stand behind that data.
Correct. So, and that's actually incredibly powerful to people who engage us, because we don't have an agenda when we're studying, right? We don't have a narrative. We're willing to change our minds as to whether or not we like coconut. Okay. Right. I mean, this is where this all comes in. We're willing to change our minds. When facts change, we can change. Okay. Like that is totally cool. But the way we invest our time is so important. So when we get that phone call, we do a diagnostic essentially with our future client or the people who call us. And we say, look, here's what you can know because it's knowable. Here's what we can say we believe because we've taken all these disparate data points, we've researched them, we feel really confident about the sources that they come from. And it feels to be where we can say we can believe something, right? With some basis, with some really good basis. But here's also what we can't know yet. But we can actually create a framework as to how we want to monitor that, right? So it's making it very clear. Here's what is knowable. Here's actually what we can say we strongly believe because we've done the research and the investment, but here's also what we don't know. And that process of communicating back to their own stakeholders and constituents, right, is incredibly powerful because it commands trust, right? There's a sincerity, there's a rigor, there's an authenticity kind of behind all of that. And that ultimately is what the goal is to build trust in decision-making. So we mirror that what we can't know yet, right? Yes. On data, you see where I'm going with this. That's where we hold wonder. We hold wonder, like, what is that? And we do all sorts of qualitative research around that typically, but it's the same for data as it is for people, and I think that's probably why I'm wired to love the middle and to love the conversation and to love the complexity of people and individuals and conversations. I can hold oppositional views in my head. It's the weirdest thing in the world. Both things that feel like they're oppositional can be true, right? Like you can hold grief and still have joy, right? Just for, as an example.
Vision. I mean, you're doing the vision, not to interrupt. Wonder is that vision in that middle area. And not to interrupt, that's why you are the chief whiteboard advisor. You just created that whiteboard and laid it out And if I can interject, you have now created the messaging to your stakeholders. That is so, so powerful, because that is where we went, and we've had how many conversations about this, about the small business messaging, on how the triple Ps came out, the idle loans, how the economy changed every 2 weeks. And I say, don't ever say no, apply even if you don't qualify, because you never know when you're going to be approved on something 6 years later, 6 months later, whatever, because it happened to me. 10 months later, I went, you're doing what? This was not a real thing. And because you were in here, and I'm like, it didn't make sense. So to your point, messaging and how you get there and why you got there and what that looked like, and give them vision of strength to pick and choose, so they have the facts and all the facts based on what you have curated, a visionary.
And what I hear from you in that as well, Desiree, what aligns, not surprisingly, beautifully between the two ladies here on the screen, right, is when you hold wonder and you're transparent about how a framework of how you want to hold wonder, right? And identifying that, you invite people into the process to co-experience and co-create that wonder with you. And the sword I am willing to die on all day long is, we are absolutely created for community and engagement. Okay. We are not actually built as a people to be isolated. And so whatever you can do, like you, me, in our process, where we are inviting people into that process of wonder, instead of people just waiting to see what is it that Neely, wants to say about the consumer. I'm like, well, here's what I can tell you I know. Here's what I can tell you what I believe. I will always leave you with what we don't know as well, because I want to invite people into that process to co-create, because that is actually what will make a better process of understanding and insight. Like, we are better together than we are apart. And so I think that's the thing that I love about holding wonder, is it invites people in to hold wonder and create with you.
I am so thrilled in so many ways of not only this podcast, but calling you a friend and knowing you, because that wonder is so powerful. I mean, I'm excited to use that. I'm going to steal it from you. I'm going to say,
please, it's not mine. It's not mine.
No, but I've never heard anyone say to hold wonder. It is like, the old in LinkedIn where they have the support, holding the heart and helping and caring and love. You're holding wonder. You're holding the wonder of vision. Instead of calling you a visionary, instead of you're saying that, you can help shape and give thought to what's going on. Holding wonder is like a magical Disney. You immediately think of magical feelings and positivity running through your body. So you've negated the negativity already by just saying, I'm holding wonder of thought. And whatever that wonder is of you versus of me versus everyone else in the room is inviting to have part of that conversation. I absolutely love that.
Thank you. I will give full credit. It was the inspiration from, again, this is why I like the interconnectivity of being a professor. The president of our university, Dr. Scott Hagan, he posted about this, about holding wonder as a kind of an exhortation or like an invitation to do that. And man, when I read it and knowing who he is and the character of who he is and really the tone setting he does across that whole university, it's so authentic and it's so true. And it has stuck with me. And so it's actually changed how I've been kind of integrating and thinking about some of the business. Like, we've always done that, like, what do you know? What do you believe? What do you not know? But really understanding and identifying that what do you not know is actually where we hold wonder in our business. That has made me a better advisor to, Fortune 500, and publicly traded companies. So,
well, but see, that's the coolest thing about it is that where big businesses go, Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 1000, Fortune 100, their opportunity to continue to be sustainable, whether you're a small business or big business, are bigger numbers and more avenues to go through that. And you have to be the forerunner of the wonder. They're the ones who change the quickest and fast, because you're going to move this massive boat. Moving a little teeny tug is no big deal, but moving that carrier ship is a big deal. And so that wonder is this. You set my day to it truly is. It fixed my inspiration. 2021, I asked everyone on my delegate, everyone on my council, and I said, what is that one word? And mine is inspiration, inspire, to get you to inspire, to want to be successful, to want to get up out of bed, to want to live your best life, to want to be part of the solution and want to be a change maker. Because if you don't want, we lose the desire to be our best.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Completely agree with that. And, just to bring it to some of the numbers, on the economy, here's where we're holding wonder. $1.5 trillion of direct stimulus isn't going to happen again. It just feasibly cannot happen. It will not happen. It's not on the table in any of the spending bills, to this level of direct stimulus payment to the consumer. So what do you do when you have, I just looked it up this morning in the Census Bureau's household pulse survey, 3.5 million people fear that they're very likely or somewhat likely to be evicted in the next 2 months. Okay. That's a survey-based data from the Census Bureau, pretty reliable source overall. We have 3.5 million people who feel that way. Whether or not that's true is a whole nother issue, but that's how they feel. So if you feel that way, that proclivity, right? Not capacity, proclivity, like that's going to affect how you do things. We have, I think it's 9 million, 10 million job openings right now. We're at like all-time high job openings. Like people cannot, you, my friend, can speak about this. There's so many businesses looking to hire people.
Businesses are closing down because they can't find people to work. Right. And it's because, and the pay scale's gone up 50% in certain job fields. Yes. And what, you're lucky I'm here, let alone you want me to work. Oh my God, the clock says no, I'm out of here. And I'm dictating what I want, not what you're going to offer me. And if you don't, I walk the door. Mm-hmm. And most people don't realize the onboarding process, the fees associated with it, the whole exercise to go with it is horrific. And you've got people losing their entire businesses because they can't fill the people in, and then they quit in mid-shift or whatever, in all different economies, whether it's fast food joints, whether it's small business in a retail center, whether it's fulfillment centers. We could go down the list. And I had a saying that I took a statistic that someone said a couple of years ago, that 60% of the jobs are going to be all new, that we have been formed here in the process. This is before the pandemic, because the fourth industrial revolution. So if you look at, if you look at that, we are creating our own jobs, but at the same time, those things that we depend on, the food, the supply chain, the grocery stores, the products and services that we use, who's the nurses, the doctors right now going on as we're recording this live to you, is ending physician burnout. Ending physician burnout. How can you even think that's not going to affect the consumer behavior when you don't have, you go to the doctor and the doctor's not there because there's not enough staff, and you're looking at an empty building or a full building, but there's no one to help you.
Right. Or that doctor's not bringing their full self to that appointment, right? Because of how fatigued they are on whatever their externalities have been as well. And, that absolutely, I mean, all of this has implications. All of this is.
And where do you get the data? Okay. So Miss Data Queen, Neely, that's another thing you talk about. How can you bring the wonder of the data if no one's even analyzing the data, because we never even thought of analyzing the data, let alone even think of going down that path?
Well, that is an interesting question. I would say, let's see, where's the data? You had also asked me to prepare a tip. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've done rule 1, maintain poise. Rule 2, hold wonder, right? We haven't done 3 yet. We'll come back to 3. But before we get to 3, I'm going to give you the tip, because this is key. Train your brain to read methodology before narrative.
Train your brain
to read methodology before narrative. We have, there's something we kind of snarkily say occasionally in client conversations when they're looking for that silver bullet of data, like the world is not short of data and noise. We are a little light on wisdom and insights. Okay. Those are two totally different things. So like there's data out there, but is it good data? Has it been collected appropriately? Has it been an appropriate sample size? People talk a lot about like financial literacy or news literacy. I guess the backpack I need to carry is data literacy, or something to that effect. I don't know. I don't know if it's the backpack I want to carry, but I will if no one else wants to step up and talk about it. But read methodologies. Like whenever I see like a survey from something, it's very clickbaity on its title. And if I choose to actually click in there, right? Because sometimes I don't click on clickbaity sort of titles, I will go in there and I will go straight down and find their methodology. If they have not produced a methodology, they do not deserve my attention.
This is
they do not deserve my attention or space in my brain. If you're going to give me a hard-hitting, headline about something majorly clickbaity, you better have a methodology if you want my attention. And I have no problem calling that out.
You're demanding that the piece be responsible to the heading. And that, unfortunately, like my light going in and out, I kind of love this.
I love it.
Your lighting's
good, girl. Your lighting's good. I love it.
Well, it's because the light coming in, but never mind. It's the sun shining in. I'm trying to block and it's just like hit me like there's no wire. But hey, we've had no noise, so I'm happy over here. So you've hit two things here. You're supposed to be digging out the ground over here, guys. Holding wonder and data literacy. So if you think of data literacy, financial literacy, we hear that so often. I just love data literacy because it really makes you think like ecosystem. What is real data? How it's sampled? Where it's sampled? Is it been curated? And is the most important thing that's accountable for its data, right? Data literacy. I love that. You've got to get a t-shirt made for that and say, I'm accountable data literacy, or I'm data literacy, because I think it's a trend that we need to talk about. Seriously.
It is, it reminds me, I don't know if you ever read, it was just a gorgeous book, Michael Pollan's book, The Omnivores Dilemma. Okay.
No, go ahead.
I don't even know, it's forever years ago. He's an amazing writer. I appreciate his authorship. I read quite a bit, but I appreciate his authorship. But he goes through the process of following different foods and meals, like a highly processed meal, like a hunter's meal, right? And he goes through this whole process, and I think it's 4 different chapters or 4 different sections he does this in. And in the book, there's a lot in the book. This is not the summary of the book, but I think it's like 400 pages or something. In this book, he actually tries to find the path to a chicken nugget. And he can't. He actually can't follow the whole food chain all the way, at least my memory of this book, is that he can't. He gets stopped out. Like he can't actually figure out exactly how the food chain works down to a chicken nugget. And it bothers him. But I always think about that visual when I think about data points. If I can't actually fully track how that went from, the survey creation to what the questions are, to how many people were asked, what day they were asked on, that matters. If you're asked a question on a day of national tragedy versus a day of national joy, it could actually matter the outcome as to how something gets answered, right? Like how people are influenced. Yep. Was that delivered on someone's payday check day? You know what I mean? Was it not? These are the questions we get really deep into understanding the methodology. How was that data collected? What's the sample size? What are all the different kind of statistical, correlations and all these other like fancy words that we don't need to get into. But the point, we look into that. If I cannot track that journey from, chicken to chicken nugget in data, Desiree, it doesn't get my attention. It doesn't. And it won't be included in our process. And explaining that in love in true respect to our clients sometimes, because they're like, but I see this one article and I see this one data point, and this is exactly the thing we need to tell our investors, or we need to tell, so-and-so or our board. You can tell your board that, but you won't sleep well at night telling your board that.
I love it. I love it. You give them consequences.
Let's find another way. I'm not going to tell you no. I'm going to say not this, and let's go find something else that you can sleep excellently at night at knowing the integrity of the data that you went into that process. So yes, we advise people on the consumer economy, but I think in some ways we're data integrity people, really, right? Kind of navigating through the data process.
Broke it down so simple. How do you if you can't connect to getting a chicken to a chicken nugget, this scientific, robotic quantum physics,
I'm not interested. It doesn't get my attention, and it shouldn't have yours. Okay.
The simplicity of, hey, you chef, you out there that's trying to cook this, that chicken nugget that came out of that bag that's frozen. I'm sorry. I told you we have giggles and giggles. This is stupid. But if you think about the simplicity of that comment and how you apply when you talk to GDP and how we got here, the ecosystem that I created, that deliverable, in all seriousness, is what creates the consumer behavior that creates 2/3 of our economy that flows in that space. And that simple suggestion is the power of what this is where you break it down from each of the different layers and how it comes back to the retail, the spending, the ability to use what's so important in our life, daily life, what matters. Because when you take that pause and re-amplify what is most important to me, that's what you're getting paid for, is thinking ahead of what the consumer is thinking and not trying to use AI to analyze where my eyes are going, what I'm looking at, where I'm going, how I'm being programmed into buy and purchase and analyze my money, and thinking that I have more money because I'm going to get more money because I've been entitled to it for 2 years. So now I get another 5 years and you're going to take care of me the rest of my life. And that is where we get back into it. So that leads into rule number 3. Otherwise, you and I are going to be here for 5 hours.
Rule number 3, this flows pretty perfectly, I think. Rule number 3 for me is, see if I can simply put it. The simple statement is, unity isn't agreement. Okay. And belonging isn't necessarily cherishing. I'm heavily influenced by the excellence in work of Frances Fry and Ann Morris. They wrote a book called Unleashed. I recommend every single C-suite person that comes in my life, you need to read Unleashed. It's a fairly new book, but it's big fan. And Frances and Ann are frequently on Clubhouse, and they're very generous, in their time. Cool. Yeah. So the Leader's Guide is the Clubhouse room, but very influenced, very, very, very influenced by Frances's work for a long time in my career. I've actually been following her for a very long time. But the book Unleashed talks around creating a culture of cherishing, where people feel like they're cherished. And I've been thinking a lot about that. And I don't know if actually Frances would agree necessarily with this point, but sometimes I think it's important to go into difficult conversations with a posture of willing to sacrifice popularity, what's popular, or belonging with a group in order to create spaces where everyone can feel cherished. And that is done, I believe, for me, that is done by talking through how we go from chickens to chicken nuggets, right? Like kind of demystifying, understanding where kind of the oppositional views are, and then shining light, maybe from an antiseptic sort of way, right? On like, where really is the integrity of the facts that maybe we're standing on, but doing it in such a way where I get to take the bullets and the people involved don't have to take the bullets among each other. I would infinitely, I'm very, very thick-skinned. Coming from Wall Street, I am more than happy to take all the bullets for our leadership teams and our boards so that they don't have to do that with each other, so that we can come to an understanding as to what really is, what do we know? What do we really believe? And what do we not know? Like getting into that framework. Because boards and leadership teams that trust each other make better decisions.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that
They make
not
better
only to read that book, but thank you to be, and I know I've been in her room, but that is power.
She's
And
amazing.
and
amazing. Yeah.
the thing that gets me is that how your analogy of going into the boardroom is so important. Some of the most incredibly change people like Rebecca Steele, Carla Harris, to go down the line, have changed the trajectory. You know, you look at Rebecca Steele, what she did with the Bank of America, where she went and got all the 1,500 white tents around the United States and got them to do a short sale or loan mod within an hour. Who would ever dream that you would do a short sale loan mod back in 2008, right? And where that was, 2009, 10 when it actually happened, but it was because of the fallout. And then you look at what happened to the ability to go into these rooms and have, Carla Harris's pearls being outside the room, getting everyone to trust and like you so they can go defend you while you're in the room. So you're having that conversation about you might not be the most popular person and at the risk of losing the popularity contest, but you have the respect and the understanding and everyone get that vision of thought to go with it. And I believe that's where we have the problems. We bring it to a gender piece real quick for the women, is that we don't go and back the women when they are standing up to have that conversation, because they feel that they've worked so hard to get to that seat that sometimes people don't stand up to help each other while we're there to have that connectivity. I can't tell you how many stories that I've had to where men have brought in women specifically, give them the seat, get them going, and then they're so incredible. And then the next one comes on and they're thinking that they're going to support them and stand up for them. And they don't say a word because they're there and they're not backing them to go with it. Now, granted, this was a few years back, but we still have that problem. And to your point, risking the popularity contest and risking the thought of even being in that room, you're bringing that respect back to that core. And that is where consumer behavior, as our own CEO, our own board, our own trigger point, I think it runs full circle, that we now become responsible. What is those 5 points is going to make me trigger happy? How do I settle them down? How I take that pause? Because it's no different, because this is my table. Just like that table is that you go to the higher level, you have exponential people underneath you. But if you're a mother, that table is your kids. If you're a furry animal lover like that is your babies. And just like up there, because your shareholders are your babies that you're responsible for. So here you are, the ecosystem consumer behavior. Yes,
this was such a great conversation, Desiree. I appreciate you holding space for wonder in what this is. I mean, you reached out and you're like, hey, let's do this. I think together we would have a great conversation. This conversation for me just far exceeded even my own expectations. Even as I woke up this morning and, had my cup of coffee and thought about what a fun time we would have. So thank you for living these rules of the game out in your own life and in your own podcast. Thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you. Well, girl, hug. Thank you. We got to do this again, because if I give 1 minute, what do we have for our future for 2021? You talked about touch that we're not going to have another 1.5 trillion because we'd be at $30 trillion in debt. We can't get that approved. That's not even going to happen. Yeah. It's like, okay, we can't just keep printing money. Otherwise it's going to be worthless. So if you were to give you gave a tip, but we broke it down to consumer behavior. What you get, we can recap the 3 rules and the tip, but what would be the most simplest way that you could say they could do this second, that you feel would be the energy that we could all take from this?
On the professional kind of development side, it's definitely, maintain your poise, hold space for wonder, and create spaces where unity is in agreement. And that would be it. The tip is understanding your methodology before you choose to take on a narrative, right? So data literacy is the tip. But really, the question I want to leave anyone who's listening to this or watching this is, do you know your customers' economic realities?
Ooh.
Do you? Do you think you do, or do you actually know? because it is knowable. That there are things you can know, there's things you can believe, and there's things you cannot know about your consumers' economic realities. And too often we observe that companies will do like marketing personas, about their targeted demographics. And those are really helpful and important exercises, but that is not what the economic realities are of your consumers. And that is absolutely going to be what defines the second half of 2021, 2022, and 2023, is understanding that each individual consumer demographic group actually has very different economic realities right now. The economic reality was very simple with 1.5 trillion direct stimulus and federal pandemic unemployment compensation. The job was easy. The job's going to get real hard, real fast, which is probably why we are getting some inbound uptick right now, because I think people are seeing the nuances in their business. So those nuances require deep expertise. We can help.
And in that closing, how do they get a hold of you to utilize you for your exceptional expertise?
I'm very findable. With a name like Neely Tamminga, it's hard to hide a digital footprint. So for sure, LinkedIn messaging works. I'm very responsive there. Neely at distilladvisory.com. You can go to distilladvisory.com and see what we do. And a few of the people we help, we don't put everybody out there, but a few of the people that we've helped and help. And you can, our contact information is on our website, so distilladvisory.com. And it would be our joy to listen and see how we can help, if we can help.
And also, obviously, where we met on Clubhouse, if they want to hear you in action. So you do Consumer Unscripted and you have a couple clubs. So let's close out with those clubs.
All right. So Consumer Unscripted is the unofficial club of Distill Advisory, where we do talk about consumer behavior in fun, engaging ways, very adorable and very nerdy sort of ways, because that's fun. I do hang out in a handful of Desiree's rooms because I really appreciate the real estate perspective and the excellence that you bring, Desiree, on like women in business and small business specifically. And then Power in Industry is another club that I participate in, a global macro roundup with really intelligent people. I learn something every single week on Sundays when we gather together there. And then, of course, where I'm probably spend most of my time is on the News Club, where I help moderate a business news show 2 days a week. As well as contribute as their kind of voice of business and economics most mornings. So it's a ton of fun. I very much enjoy the News Club as well. So,
excellent. I mean, you hear the fun, you hear the laughter, you hear the great analogies, you hear the energy of I learned 5 new phrases that are going to go in my vocabulary on a daily basis. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, Neely. I have absolutely loved this. And everyone, follow Editor B, our podcast, our Wednesdays 8 a.m. for the rules of the game. And the idea is that let's make sure if you have any questions or anyone who'd like to be a guest on our podcast, in addition to, I run the Working with Family Offices on Monday at 5 p.m. on Clubhouse, because the reality is that how do we connect and how do we grow? And nothing's ever too small to look at, because the idea is that we have to, as you heard, it's all an ecosystem. And if we can strengthen that tile, we can strengthen the quality of life. As you see, the quality of life, the entrepreneurship, and the ability to really strengthen and grow who we are and what we are. So thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Desiree.
Yeah. But everyone, please be safe and stay healthy. That is the most important thing we have in the world today. So thank you. Have a great one. All right. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.